He found one coin in the forest. 6 months later, it made him $3.2 million. It didn't look like much at first. Just a dirty silver disc, half buried in moss. Thin, cold, worn by time, the kind of thing most people wouldn't even bother to pick up. But he wasn't most people. He'd been in that forest since 5:40 a.m., chasing faint signals with a scratched-up metal detector, and the kind of patience only obsession could buy. 3 false alarms already, rusted nails, soda tabs, a chunk of barbed wire that bit his glove. Then the 4th signal. Shallow, low tone. Probably trash. He almost kept walking. But something about the silence stopped him. No birds, no wind, just the steady breath of the trees, tall and ancient, dripping fog into shafts of early light. He knelt. The moss came up in one soft sheet. Beneath it, a slick layer of cold soil. He dug with bare hands, fingers numb, nails caked black. And there it was, a coin, silver, heavier than it looked, one side smooth from wear, the other still marked, 2 crossed hammers, a crown, and beneath them a year, 1756. His pulse jumped because he'd seen those hammers before, once buried in the appendix of an old shipping manifest from Cadiz, a convoy of 6 Spanish cargo ships rerouted north during the war, rumored to be carrying raw silver to a mint in Königsberg. 4 of them sank. 2 were never found. He turned the coin over. The backside looked blank at first, but as he angled it into the light, something glinted, etched by hand, faint but unmistakable, a pine tree. He looked up and realized the forest around him wasn't just a location. It was a symbol, a mark on a much older map. And what he just pulled from the moss wasn't pocket change. It was a key. He didn't tell anyone. Not that day, not the next. He took the coin home in a sock, wrapped tight and buried at the bottom of his pack. He washed it by hand in the kitchen sink, using only warm water and a toothbrush. Then he pulled out the binder. He'd been tracking shipwreck rumors and failed expeditions since college. Not professionally, not yet, but enough to have folders, files, and scanned records from 6 different countries. And when he flipped to the map he'd marked 6 months earlier, a smuggler's route through the Baltic forest corridors, his hands started to shake. Because there it was, drawn in the corner of the page, near a scribbled coast and a river bend. A pine tree, sketched beside a merchant's stamp. Not part of the original document, added later, annotated by hand. And the stamp? Same crossed hammers, same crown. He laid the coin next to it. The match was perfect, but there was something else. A symbol just above the tree, a barely legible set of initials, TV. He zoomed in, cross-checked. Nothing in the legend, no reference in the index. Then he remembered the interview. A forum thread from 5 years ago, barely a paragraph long, quoting a Polish diver who claimed to have recovered a lead weight marked TV from a forest lake, half a mile from where a colonial trail cut through the old trade road. He'd saved it. He pulled it up again, and there it was. TV equals Tomasz Velen, Baltic route foreman, 1750s, known for carving live markers into pine trees to guide caravans inland. He looked up. Pine trees, dozens of them, all roughly the same age. But what if? He grabbed a flashlight, a measuring tape, a compass, and went back. The forest had gone silent. No bird song, no wind. Just the wet crackle of moss under his boots and the faint rhythm of his own breath, fogging in the cold morning air. He moved slowly now, not because he was tired, though he was, but because he knew better. You don't rush this part. Not when you're this close. He marked the first tree at 0748. The second came 18 minutes later. A vertical slash, the edges worn with age. About shoulder height on a pine that had to be over 100 years old. But the bark told a different story. It had grown around the symbol, healed and reopened again. A language written in scars. He moved in 30-foot arcs, sweeping with the detector, pausing every time he saw moss that felt too symmetrical. He wasn't just following signals anymore. He was following design, something man-made. Tree 3 had a triangle burned into it. Tree 4 had a crown. By tree 6, the pattern was clear. Not random, not natural. Someone had laid a path. He checked his notes from the night before. The manifest from Cadiz mentioned multiple holds, 3 storage chambers, each labeled separately. 1, 2, 3. Only 2 of the ships had ever been found. The third, Santa Dos, was listed as possibly lost en route. To covert drop location, Foreman, Velen. The name carved into tree 7. He took a photo, ran his fingers over the bark. The angle of the burn felt different. Not decorative, functional. Like a road sign, but coded. That's when he noticed the ridge. A slope in the land, barely visible from above. But when he stepped back, it revealed itself. A shallow curve descending eastward, like a drained riverbed. Pine roots on both sides seemed to bow with it, as if shaped by something that passed through long ago. He followed it. 5 minutes in, he passed a rotted leather strap nailed to a stump. 15 paces later, an iron buckle. 20 more, and he found a stone buried in the moss, perfectly flat, with a chipped corner. Unnatural, like it had once been part of a floor. Then he saw it. A tree split at the base, unnaturally. It leaned, but hadn't fallen. And at the base, something metallic. He ran. It wasn't a box, not yet. It was a plate, bronze, oxidized green and black. About the size of a manhole cover, sunken into the ground beneath root and earth. He cleared around it with his gloves, then pulled out the brush. Symbols, not deep. He pulled his pack forward, pulled out the small field crowbar, wedged it under the edge of the lid, and stopped. Because something under the moss shifted. At first, he thought it was just his boot, but then he heard it again. A faint scrape. He froze, head tilted, ears open, silence. Then, a thud. Not far, not animal. He killed the headlamp, dropped low, waited. Long minutes passed. Maybe nothing. Maybe paranoia. But he didn't touch the lid again that day. He covered it back up, packed the moss, swept the area with a branch, then marked the nearest tree with a stone tied in twine. He walked out the long way, not his original path, a zigzag, just in case. At home, he locked the coin in a gun safe, scanned all notes, GPS tagged every photo, then stripped the metadata. Backed up the files in 3 places. He didn't sleep that night, didn't eat much the next day. The money didn't matter, not yet. What mattered was what was under that plate. If it was real, if even half of what the Spanish manifest claimed was true, then he wasn't looking at a collection. He was standing on top of a fortune, and someone else might know it too. Unpack the last detail. Finally, hardly again. But this time, he parked the car farther away and took the long trail in. No metal, no tags, no phone. Just his notes, a compass, a crowbar, and an emergency sat phone buried in a waterproof pouch. The walk took nearly an hour. When he arrived, everything looked undisturbed. But that didn't mean it was. He knelt beside the tree he'd marked, dug gently around the lid's edge. Still there, still solid. He took out the crowbar, pressed again. This time, it moved. A low creak, barely audible. The kind of sound that made your back teeth clench. Rust grinding against rust as old tension gave way. He paused. Why? Then lifted. It came up half an inch, then another. Then, with a final exhale of cold, earthy air, it opened. Beneath it, darkness, soil walls, and a ladder made of timber blackened by age. He checked the first rung. Solid. He went down. It wasn't a cavern. It wasn't grand. It was deliberate. A box cut into earth, 7 by 7, 5 feet high. And in the middle, wrapped in oilskin, stacked like bricks, were what looked like ingots. Dozens. He picked one up. It was heavy, cold, soft corners. He scraped the edge with a knife. Silver, stamped faintly, 1756, Cadiz. Then, beside the pile, a second bundle. Paper, ledgers, some unreadable, some intact. He flipped through them by headlamp, fingers trembling. Shipment counts, seal notations, dates and initials, many matching what he'd seen in the archive. But one page stood out, a sketched map. Not of this spot, of another, marked Trez. His knees gave a little, because that meant this wasn't the vault. This was just one. There were 2 more. He left the vault at dusk, covered the lid, replanted moss by hand, marked nothing on GPS, and he didn't go home. He drove 2 towns over, checked into a roadside motel under a fake name. No Wi-Fi, no card. Just cash, burner phone, and the weight of what he'd seen. He spent the night staring at the ceiling, going over every step, every symbol, every map. There were 2 more caches. That's what the second vault drawing said. One marked Tress, one unmarked, but with the same crown and tree symbol and a year, 1757. The timeline fit. The route fit. But the question wasn't where. It was, who else knew? Because someone had been near that lid. He hadn't imagined the sound, the pressure. They weren't close anymore. But she'd worked with him on a smuggling site in Lithuania. Ex-archaeologist. Calm under pressure. No drama. She owed him a favor. I need a second set of eyes, he said. She didn't ask questions. Just said, send coordinates. I'll meet you in 48. They met at a logging pullout, just before dawn. Marta wore a hood and didn't smile. She studied the coin, then the map. This is real, she said. You know that, right? He nodded. She looked at him hard. Then you better be ready for what comes with it. They went in on foot. No chatter. No phones. The air was colder than last time, thicker. Even the trees seemed darker. They reached the vault, checked the perimeter, undisturbed. He opened it again, showed her everything. Marta crouched, ran her hands over the ledgers. These are just shipping manifests, she murmured. These are names. She held one up, a sin, dozens of initials. Symbols next to them, some with circles, some with crosses, others with small stars. It's coded, she said. Inventory, personnel, whatever it is, it's not just cargo. Then she paused. Wait. She pointed to a mark on the bottom corner. A V inside a square. Not Velen. Vigilancia, she whispered. The Crown's private watchers. Spy network. He stared at her. Why would that be here? She folded the page carefully. Because this isn't a vault. It's a drop. Then she looked up, suddenly alert. Did you say there were 2 more? They took the new map and hiked south, following the tree line for 4 hours. Just before dark, they found it. A tree split at the base, like before. Only this time, no plate, no marker. But someone had dug, recently. Fresh shovel lines, broken roots, a torn scrap of canvas. It had already been emptied. Marta went pale. Someone's ahead of us. They didn't go back that night. They camped off-trail, slept in shifts. In the morning, his car had been searched. Nothing taken, but the glove box was open. Someone wanted them to know. They drove in silence for miles. Back roads, no signs. He took 3 wrong turns on purpose. Marta never questioned him. When they finally stopped, it was near a quarry he knew from a failed dig 6 years ago. Abandoned. Dead, quiet, and invisible from the main road. They hid the silver in a dry well. Not the whole stash, just the biggest bars. Packed tight in waterproof cloth, lowered by rope, capped with a rock and loose brush. Then they sat on the edge in silence. "We should report it," Marta said quietly. The next few days were a blur of planning. They checked old smuggler maps, scoured digital archives from universities, bribed a retired border officer for a list of pre-war land resettlements. Then, on the 3rd night, she found it. A name. Tres Cruces. Not a town, a glen. Forgotten after a fire in 1893. Last listed on a regional map in 1847. The name matched the page from the vault. They triangulated the coordinates, checked soil records, old satellite passes, then packed their gear. They reached it on foot after a 6-hour hike through wet forest. No signs, no paths, just a curve in the land, a bend in a creek, and a thicket of trees denser than anything they'd walked through. And there, beneath a root shelf, another mark. 3 slashes, a pine, and a crown. He dropped to his knees, brushed aside the moss, and saw it. Another plate. This one newer, clean edges, untouched. He looked at Marta. She looked at him. "You will?" He paused, then shook his head. "Not yet." They stepped back, scanned the clearing. No movement. Then, from the opposite hill, a flicker. Sunlight bouncing off something. Glass? Scope? They both froze. She reached slowly into her jacket, pulled out binoculars. He raised a hand to block the light, and the flash disappeared, gone. He turned to Marta. "We're not alone." She nodded, already pulling the tarp from her pack. "We open this now. We don't get another chance." He knelt beside the plate, ran his hand over the edge, then took a breath and said, "Let's see if it was worth it." And what we found under that second vault, let's just say, it's why we're not using our real names anymore. Subscribe. You'll understand. They opened it before sunrise. No cameras, no documents, just flashlights and gloves and the quiet understanding that whatever was inside, they'd carry it for the rest of their lives. The second vault was deeper, twice the size of the first, reinforced with planks of salt-cured oak. There were metal brackets, rusted nearly to dust, and a faint smell of oil and something older, almost like ink. Inside were 3 compartments. The first held bars. Like before, stamped silver. A few loose coins, but fewer than the last cache. The second, documents. Dozens. Sealed envelopes, wax unbroken, each labeled in a code neither of them could fully decipher. But some bore familiar marks. V, square. A different seal. 2 blades crossing a crown. Marta's hands trembled. "This is intelligence," she whispered. "Not shipping logs. Not cargo." They opened one envelope. Inside, a map. Thin parchment. European coastline. Dated 1754. Handwritten notes in the margins. Place names that no longer existed. Then, in the third compartment, a box. Oak. Ironbound. With a lock rusted shut. He pried it open. Inside, 2 books. One in Latin, the other in Polish. And beneath them, a ring. Gold. Old. Too fine for a soldier, too plain for a king. Engraved only with a name, Velen. Marta stared at it for a long time. "This is his," she said. "This is personal." They left the second vault in silence, buried it again, marked nothing, took only the books, the ring, and a selection of sealed packets, left the rest. The hike back was long. Both of them were quiet, not tense, reverent. What they'd found wasn't just money. It wasn't even just history. It was something heavier. They hid what they took in 3 separate caches across 2 towns. Never more than 1 item in a single place. Then they vanished. Burner phones destroyed. Backpacks swapped. Marta cut her hair. He grew a beard. For 3 months, they didn't speak. But they both read. The Latin book was a log. Velen's, presumably. Half code, half journal. It described routes, names, betrayals. Shipments that weren't in the official records. Entire supply lines hidden from the crown. But the Polish one was different. It was personal. A record of watchers. Not soldiers, not sailors, civilians. Hidden men and women assigned to observe land routes, paid in silver. Answering not to kings, but to the shadow court. The last page bore a list, and one of the names matched a plaque in the town where Marta had grown up. They went there separately, 2 weeks apart. Both saw it. A stone cross, half buried in ivy. No last name, just one initial and the year. 1792. They met again in Belgium, neutral ground. In a rented room above a bookstore, they laid everything out. The maps, the names, the V insignia pages, photos of both vaults, the ring. And then they made a choice. Not to go public, not yet. Instead, they digitized everything, created 6 encrypted backups, sent each to a different contact with a single note. If something happens to us, publish this, all of it. Then they disappeared again. Today, most of what they found is still buried. Not because they're hiding it, but because they're waiting. For the right time, the right protections, the right hands to take it forward. Because silver can be sold, maps can be misread, but knowledge, that has consequences. And what they found wasn't just a treasure. It was a manual. A record of an invisible network buried inside empires, of lives traded for shipments, towns erased, truths rewritten. It was more than they expected, more than not. So they left it there, some of it. Enough to prove it was real, but not enough to finish the story. Not yet. They still talk. Once a year, same date. They never say names, never mention cities, just coordinates and time. Then they go walking. No cameras, no paper, just footsteps and old pine trees, and the memory of a coin, half buried in moss, that led them to a truth too big to spend.